Hi students, welcome to lesson number 16 on social policy. Here the brief introduction about the lesson. The Constitution of India is the source of most of the social policies formulated and executed in the country. The Indian government has implicitly committed itself to be a welfare state. In order to fulfill the obligations as a welfare state, the government has formulated several policies and plans of action for the welfare of marginalized and weaker sections of the society. Social policy related to guidelines for the changing, maintenance and creation of living conditions that are conducive to human welfare. Social policy aims to improve human welfare and meet human needs for education, health, housing and social security. Formulation of social policy would have no meaning unless it is executed promptly and effectively. The scope of social welfare administration is implementation of the social policy. It is also stated that social work administration is a process of transforming social policy into social services. That is a two-way process. Transforming social policy into concrete social service and the use of experience in recommending modification of policy. In this lesson, through three main areas, health, education and social welfare, we would understand the policy guidelines and administration of these policies in the form of programs and services as well. This would also help in evaluating macro-micro level linkages. As social work professionals, not only we should be aware of the salient points of the related social policy in the area in which we are working, but also should develop critical appraisal contents of the policy guidelines in the light of social justice, equality and empowerment. Now the objectives of the lesson. Social policy is the guidelines formulated by the state for the welfare and development of its various population groups. Social welfare administration is the execution of the programs, schemes and projects meant to achieve the goals delineated in the social policy. After reading this lesson, the students will be able to understand the meaning and concept of social policy, and this lesson will give an insight into the significance and various models of social policy and also its implementation. Now, what is the concept of social policy? Broadly speaking, the term policy refers to the general guidelines of principles which give direction to a particular course of action by the government or by an organization. It also refers to, in a very specific sense, an intended or executed course of action. Now, the definitions of social policy. An attempt to define social policy is beset with many practical difficulties. Is there one social policy with capital S and P, or are there multiple social policies with small s and small p? This question is relevant because we have social policies compartmentalized into a policy for scheduled caste, a policy for backward classes, a policy for weaker sections, a policy for women, a policy for children and so on. Does an addition of these policies make up a whole social policy? We have direct principles of state policy, the fundamental rights and the preamble to the Constitution. Do these make up a social policy? In the light of the above dilemmas, we attempt to define social policy. Social policy can be referred to both in the plural and singular case. When referred to in a plural, it denotes comprehensive and integrated set of policies in the social sectors such as health, social welfare, education, social security, etc. When used in a singular, the term social policy refers to a specific government policy such as the policy towards the SCs and STs, the policy for providing universal education, etc. Now, we will understand what are the various definitions of social policy given by various thinkers. According to David Gill, social policies are principles of action designed to influence first the overall quality of life in a society, Second, the circumstances of living of individuals and groups in that society. And third, the nature of intra-societal relationships among individuals, groups and society as a whole. According to Kulkarni, social policy is a strategy of action indicating means and methods to be followed in successive phases to achieve the declared social objectives. Marshall states that the term social policy refers to the policy of governments with regard to action having a direct impact on the welfare of citizens by providing them with services or income. According to Professor Titmuss, social policy represents a summation of acts of government deliberately designed to improve the welfare of people. So, while summarizing the whole discussion, it can be said that social policy is a deliberate action on the part of individuals, collectivities and governments undertaken to organize services, opportunities and social action so as to affect the lifestyles of people and initiate a process to prevent, postpone, initiate and manage change. Now, we will understand what are the characteristics of social policy. The first, social policy have distributional or redistributive character. So, the concern of social policy is with social and economic justice based on the principle of equality, which means that the redistribution of social resources should take place from the better off sections towards the worse off sections of society. Second characteristic is social policy is concerned with weaker and vulnerable sections of society such as poor, women, children, disabled, backward classes so as to bring them at par with the rest of society. Thus, social policy visualizes of an egalitarian society where inequalities are reduced to minimum level. Third characteristics, social policies exist in isolation. It means these are determined to a large extent by the socio-political scenario of a nation, its economic viability and last but not the least by socio-cultural ethos of people of the nation. Now, after liberalization, globalization and privatization, policies have become global and changes in one corner of the world definitely leave impact over rest of the world. Most live example of this feature is the opening up of economy by most of third world countries in accordance with the guidelines of World Bank and International Monetary Fund. With this basis, we will try to understand what are the objectives of social policy. It is frequently stated that social policies aim to bring about social change. In the final analysis also, social policies are government policies. As part of the operation of the government, social policy cannot hope to introduce fundamental changes in society, which would mean undermining the status quo on which government rests, whether in the socialized countries or in the capitalist countries. The social policy cannot usher in the fundamental structural change. It can only achieve moderate social change whereby certain undesirable conditions of a section or sections of society are redressed and as a result social tension is minimized. Second, social policy minimizes suffering and maximizes of welfare. Social policy also improves quality of life of people. It is necessary to ask whose quality of life that we want to improve. This is a pertinent question in developing countries like India, where majority of the population live in condition of serious deprivation without being able to get even the basic necessities for survival. They are said to be living in absolute poverty or below the poverty line. According to World Bank, the estimates of poor population in the developing countries is 57%. So, it should be very clear that the limited resources of the developing countries cannot be utilized to improve the quality of life of all the populations of these countries. It has been very well documented by several studies that the major beneficiaries of development planning in the third world have been the numerically small fraction of the population. So, the aim of social policy should be to redistribute social resources so that the quality of life of the top 20% of the population does not keep on improving at the cost of the provision of the basic necessities for the very survival of the 50 or 60% of the population. So, it is for this reason that 𝗵𝗵𝗸𝗃 has stated that the aim of development planning in third world should be stated as the preservation of the very life itself and not as the improvement of the quality of life, which presumes that the basic survival needs have been met. Social policy is vital for social planning. It must be conceptually clear and simple, theoretically sound, and stated in terms of desired changes achieved among target groups. The policy with clear designation of roles and responsibilities of all the stakeholders, clear directives and organizational structures goes a long way in effectively realizing its set goals. Social policy reflects the government's commitment for the particular cause for which the policy has been formulated. It implies the government priorities and resource distribution. Hence, technical and budgetary means as well as time frame should be delineated clearly in the policy. However, it may be reminded that policies are merely guidelines and do not enjoy legal sanctity as in the case of social legislations. So, since independence, the government of India has formulated many policies and reviewed and modified them from time to time, such as National Health Policy, National Policy on Education, National Policy on Empowerment of Women in India, National Policy for Persons with Disability, National Youth Policy, National Policy on Children, and so on and so forth. Many of these policies have been reviewed and revised. Say, National Health Policy have changed into National Policy of Education. These policies are comprehensive documents covering the vision and mission of the state, plan of action, targets to be achieved, stakeholders, expected outcomes, etc. Though the state cannot be sued if it fails to keep its promise mentioned in the policy, however, in this largest democracy of the world, votes of the common man prove to be a driving force for politicians to try their best in policy execution. Further, in India, social policy plays crucial role in formulation of 5-year plans. It may be reiterated that without proper execution, social policy doesn't matter how ambitious and foolproof it is, remains a paper trigger. In administration, committed leadership, internal ministerial coordination, central-state relationship, political will, representation of various stakeholders, including the grassroots people, are some of the crucial factors that influence implementation of the social policies. In the subsequent sections, we will be looking into various aspects related to social policy. Effective administration of social welfare programs requires integration of knowledge of social policy with the understanding of the theory and practice of management and administrative decision making. The need to integrate social welfare policy, content and administrative and organizational issues becomes increasingly evident as the social welfare organizations give greater attention to the efficiency and effectiveness of service delivery system. More efficient use of scarce resources is also being emphasized, especially when economic constraints are forcing administrators to be concerned with cost in making decisions between alternative policies and programs. The pressure for better utilization of existing resources has thus raised the issue in the management of social welfare organizations of the relative importance and the relationship between efficiency and effectiveness of social programs. In addition, social policy analysis involves the study of a social problem in a rational attempt to define the problem, search for possible solutions, and evaluate the cost and benefit of these alternatives to select the best solution. This rational approach to finding the best answers to problem is constrained, however, by such non-rational factors as the organizational context in which decisions are made and the cognitive limitations of the decision maker. These non-rational factors preclude a completely objective approach to problem analysis a thorough search for solutions, and an informed evaluation of the consequences of action. Thus, in the effort at problem definition, we are confronted with the limitations on our knowledge of the causes and therefore the possible solutions to social problems. For example, if we view problems of the poor as being caused by individual and personal malfunction due to lack of appropriate abilities or attitudes, then we would seek solution in terms of changing the individual. However, if we assume that the problem of poor is associated with their harsh social condition, that is lack of money, education, house, jobs, healthcare, etc., then we should seek solution in terms of changing their situation. So, the absence of validated knowledge as to the cause of social problems should not, however, relieve the policymakers from the responsibility for making conscious policy choices. It is suggested that often these policy choices are not made explicit so that the underlying value base for decisions do not receive critical examination. That is, the administrators under pressure to act may forego the opportunity for conscious choice, with the result that decisions are made largely on the basis of political feasibility. Now, we will understand what are the various models of social policy, and one among them is model A, which is called as residual welfare model of social policy. This formulation is closely related with laissez-faire position. With associated social changes that have accompanied industrialization and urbanization, there emerged a grudging recognition that under rather exceptional circumstances, malfunction of market or of the family may necessitate some temporary supplement to social provision. From the angle of policy, however, this approach perceives the family and the market as the only instruments for meeting human needs. There is emphasis on means testing and less eligibility. Selectivity is inherent in such a policy frame, and only the poor who qualify means test are selected for benefits. Now, the model B, which is called as industrial achievement performance model of social policy. This incorporates a significant role for social welfare institutions. It holds that social needs should be met on the basis of merit, work performance and productivity. It is derived from various economic and psychological theories concerned with incentives, efforts and reward, and the formation of class and group loyalties. Now, the model C, which is called as the institutional redistributive model of social policy. This model envisages built-in institutional social provision to overcome the stresses of modern complex industrial urban life. This model sees social welfare as a major integrated institution in society, providing universalist services outside the market on the principle of need. It is basically a model incorporating systems of redistribution in command over resources through time. Modern concept of social policy is inextricably bound with social justice. Mere equalization of opportunities in egalitarian socio-economic system reduces social justice just to absurdity. Thus, in the modern concept of social policy, concepts of positive discrimination and equity find prominent place. India followed this model while envisaging social policies. These three models are of course only very broad approximations to the theories and ideas of economists, philosophers, political scientists and sociologists. Many variants could be developed of a more sophisticated kind. Now, who are the actors in formulation of social policies? Like evolving social policy everywhere is a challenging task, more so in the age of dynamic technological changes affecting physical environment and social mobility. Policy formulation is done or influenced by the various actors like the government, political parties, individual reforms, volunteer organization, social action groups, plan documents, laws and codes, parliamentary committees, consumer reactions, technological breakdown, etc. Now, we will understand the social policy implementation. See, implementation is the heart of administration, as it consists of carrying out of basic policy decision. In the policy cycle, it is critical to the successful fulfillment of policy objectives. But implementation is not automatic. The implementation phase is faced with numerous problems. Effective implementation requires a change of command and the capacity to coordinate and control. Often there are shortfalls in this exercise, more so in a developing country like India. In India, there has been a dramatic rise in expenditure on programs of social inclusion in the last 5 years, but this is accompanied by growing complaints about implementation. The weaker sections of the society for whom these schemes are primarily intended are often not able to benefit because they are not sufficiently empowered to access the benefits due to them. This is despite the fact that there have been a number of legislations aimed at securing legally guaranteed rights to the Indian people through the Right to Information Act, the Forest Right Act, the Right to Education Act, the Mahatma Gandhi National Employment Guarantee Act and the National Food Security Act. Part of the problem is that the enactment of right-based schemes in an environment of illiteracy and lack of awareness and empowerment does not ensure that people will claim their rights. However, it is also true that the schemes continue to be implemented in a business as usual mode, while what is demanded by this program is an innovative break with the past. With our reforms in implementing structure, schemes aimed at social inclusion will continue to be afflicted by the poor quality syndrome. For example, in Manrega, a draft report by the Comptroller and Auditor General reveals that on average only 3.2% of registered households could avail of 100 days guaranteed work. The average employment under Manrega was just 18 days. So, due to administrative deficiencies, educate work has not been accurately calculated for the local workforce. So, gaps may result in a lapse of several days between short-term jobs, and there are currently limited projects with long-term potential to sustain a village's workforce. Shortages have led not only for touting of work, but also pockets where minimum wage is not being provided. This problem is exacerbated when monitoring is ineffective or absent. In the implementation of right to education, public schools suffer from high rates of teacher absenteeism and unfilled posts, lack of resources, deficiencies in basic infrastructure, as well as an overall decline in the number of schools being established that bears no relation to rises in population. Most schemes follow a blueprint and top-down approach with little flexibility given to field staff. Any change in the scheme requires approval from Government of India, which is time consuming. Uniformity of schemes also over the country from Mizoram to Kerala without sufficient delegation to states to change the schemes to suit local condition leads to a situation where the states, even knowing that the scheme is not doing well, become indifferent to its implementation. Many states are ruled by a political party different from that at the center. These governments do not put their weight behind CSS formulated by the union government, as they see no political advantage in successful implementation of such schemes. The successful implementation of social sector schemes requires a high degree of political commitment, that is the midday meal schemes of Tamil Nadu, EGS in Maharashtra, Antyodaya in Rajasthan and 2 rupee rice in Andhra and Telangana examples, and administrative coordination which Government of India cannot secure for want of control over the staff. Routine has taken over the functioning of government at all levels. Little time is left for officers to initiate reforms or change schemes. With the best of commitment, it often takes 2 years to get a scheme changed. In the meantime, officer gets transferred, efforts come to naught. Perception of short tenure dampens enthusiasm to undertake reforms. Many schemes assume a highly committed delivery machinery which will act as a friend philosopher and guide of the people. Even if such rare individuals exist in government, they do not stay at a particular post for a long time to make lasting impact. Incentive structure is also very weak. Thus, there are various problems in policy implementation, and they include lack of political will, prevalence of coalition government, widespread corruption at each and every level of functioning, financial constraints, red tapeism, erosion of moral values, financial constraints, inadequate staffing, absence of training, lack of people's participation, gross mismatch between actual needs and perceived needs of people, delay in getting justice. Now, we will understand what are the various strategies for effecting changes in policy, and it includes use of mass media, creation of public opinion, demonstrations, public interest, litigation, discussions, meetings and seminars, building pressure over government, submission of memorandum, signature campaign and pressure groups. To summarize, the process of social development is not like the inherent process of social change that is continuously taking place in every living community. Rather, it is a result of conscious and deliberate intervention with the instruments of policy and planning to bring about a non-random change towards the desired goals.